Good morning. I'm going to officially call the Legislation Policy Development Committee to order. And I'd like to welcome all our new committee members that are joining us, some for the first time. We're going to get started right away with our update from John and Glenn on COVID-19. John, you're muted still.
So, Charlene, are you going to do the introduction for this?
Yes, I'm having a little difficulty here, but can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Good morning, Policy Committee members. It's wonderful to see you all. And we're pleased this morning to share with you the work that has been happening in the agency around supporting our educators, our families, our students, and our districts and community in general. And without further delay, we're pleased to, there's a lot of information just based on the work that's been going on. And so I'm going to pause here and turn things over to our team, John Frasinelli, Glenn Peterson, and I know Ajit will come back in to share a part of that work as well. So with that, I will let them get started. Thank you.
So I see Ajit's still muted and he's got the first part of this. There you go.
Good morning. Thank you, Charlene, for the intro. So as you know, the department has been extremely busy with supporting our districts with transitioning to distance learning after class cancellations due to COVID-19. Our academic office created 4 volumes of resources to help districts that focused on content areas, student data privacy, assessment, professional learning, and our student support resources. These were all distance learning resources that were created. The department also worked collaboratively with several philanthropic contributions. The most prominent of those you might have heard are the 60,000 laptops from the Partnership for Connecticut that were made available for high school students in Alliance districts, as well as other districts. And those 60,000 laptops are being distributed. We also made available or received a donation from the Nui family for 187,000 Scholastic book packs for pre-K through 8 students in Alliance districts and several other districts. The Learn from Home Task Force was established by the governor and the commissioner to coordinate the distribution. And by the way, when we send around this PowerPoint, the links are embedded links and they'll take you to those particular pages. We are also working actively with the Lego group to distribute replay sort of sets, blocks for public school students, and they've already been distributed to first graders in Waterbury and Bridgeport, and to 180 students in Enfield as well. So that work is ongoing. We've conducted multiple needs assessments of districts in terms of their readiness for distance learning. And we've also more recently conducted survey on distance learning participation and barriers to access. As you know, the CARES Act is the supplemental funding that's being made available to districts that is in process. And the link here talks about the 4 priorities. Obviously, front and center is equitable access to technology, but the department is also working actively on access to high quality online curriculum and talking about education recovery and reopening, as well as social emotional well-being. The department is also represented on the governor's work group on rapid connectivity deployment. And this one is really trying to solve for those students who, despite the best efforts of everyone, still have Wi-Fi connectivity issues. They may be in our A lot of them are in our Alliance districts, but there are also several rural pockets around the state, both in East and Northwest Connecticut, where intervention and support is needed. In terms of professional development for districts, so not only did we provide static resources, we also provided dynamic resources. At the commissioner's urging, we created this professional support series, which was focused on two audiences. One was for educators, or here it says professional support series for districts. The other one was for families. So I'm going to kick this off with the district part and share a couple of slides and then turn it over to John to continue from there. So the first thing we did was a multi-part webinar series on learning at a distance and journeys of Connecticut schools. And here really we're talking about having several school districts across the state share with their peers on how they're addressing curriculum, how they're meeting the challenges, what it means to work from home, teaching science, the arts. It was really a social studies as well as agriculture and natural resources online. It was really a comprehensive approach across the content spectrum. And again, kudos to our academic office for leading a lot of this work. They did an unbelievable job. And our performance office also did some supports in terms of interim assessment administration remotely, as well as remote learning resources from Smarter Balanced, and provided tools through EdSite, our secure platform that gives longitudinal information on students. Lastly, from my point is there were also resources provided, webinars and videos provided for English learners, including best practices for serving English learners and distance learning resources as well. You'll notice that the dates on these events basically show you how many of them started in March or early April, and then they continued on. So we really ramped up very quickly to provide a whole array of supports and resources. So I'm now going to turn it over to, I believe, John.
No.
I think Glenn's going to start with the next slide.
Okay, Glenn.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Ajit. Back in early March, actually probably mid-March, Charlene asked John and me to pull together some resources, particularly webinars and videos that could support the field, support families and support students, as well as support districts. And we've made somewhere between, I didn't actually have a chance to count them all this morning, but I would say close to 20 different videos went out from our offices. Several were about social and emotional learning, and this was not only about the social and emotional learning of students and engaging students and families, but also the social emotional learning of teachers and educators. There are several support videos for them, basically caring for the caregivers. And there were many that were not even listed on the website. There were kind of private invitation things. And we've done a number of workshops for folks like adult educators, alternative school educators, specialty groups with, some of them are listed here, school nurses, school counselors, and folks like that. I think one of the most prominent ones on this page is the Student Voices webinar, because we have an actual video star in our midst. Ms. Benham participated in that, and I've heard nothing but very, very positive things from the field about that and your participation. So thank you very much. Can we go to the next slide? And so this is an example of one of the professional support series that went out. As you can see, the top one on the right, Jocelyn Mackey, Dr. Mackey and I made a presentation, or more of a check-in visit than a presentation, to the alternative school educators. But there were several of these types of things. Another for homeless liaisons, many related to family engagement. And I'm not exactly sure of the total number of professional support series documents we sent out, but 6 or 7 of them were related to the different things that we were doing in our offices. So, you know, lots and lots of people were involved in lots of things. And all of these are available on the CSD website under the COVID-19 section. And John, I think you're going to take the next one.
Hi, yes, good morning. My sound is cutting in and out, so Glenn, if you could just wave to me if my voice goes mute while I'm talking. I'm assuming you can hear me right
Okay.
now. There you go. Okay. So we, I think it's also important to mention that we've been partnering with our state agency partners on all levels. And you'll see that throughout some of the presentations that I'll talk about. And one of those areas is we partnered with the Department of Children and Families to produce 2 webinar series, one for parents and one for students on safe use of the internet. So we had an hour-and-a-half program for parents on how to talk to their kids about safe use of the internet. And then we had a really nice opportunity to engage over 100 students logged on to participate in the student-specific internet safety training. The person who we brought on to do that is a former police officer and former online sort of predator catcher. And so that was a really nice opportunity. We're going to be repeating that, of course, through the summer and throughout the fall. We'll be partnering with them to provide child trafficking and child abuse training to district specific. So that will be ongoing. We've also created something called Talk Tuesdays, which is an opportunity for folks working on student attendance on the district level to have some conversation about engaging students. We've had the commissioner and deputy commissioner of DCF come and speak to that group about DCF referrals. And we've had some really good conversations around summer programming and fall opening and best practices for engaging students during COVID. This is, as Ajit mentioned, this is the location where all of these professional support series listed on our website. So we can jump to the next slide. And again, these are more of our programs. You can see Student Voices is repeated there. We've engaged in particular at the bottom you see with the Office of Early Childhood on the importance of play and predictability. Our in-house staff provided some conversations on resources to help children learn English and develop literacy and math skills while supporting their social and emotional supports, and additional supports for family tips on how to support their children. You know, one of the conversations was about that families are the first sort of line of defense, and how do families support their kids when kids are suffering from anxiety, et cetera. Next slide.
Thank you, John. This is
Glenn, I think this
again. Yeah, the next 2 are me, and then we're back to you, John. Hello again. One of the things I wanted to mention and follow up from what John said is it wasn't just our staff that were doing these webinars and videos. We brought folks in from other departments, as John mentioned. We did one on managing during a crisis that included folks from DCF, CHDI, the Child Health and Development Institute, an organization we work with very closely, and lots of practitioners from the field. In the video that Ms. Benham participated in, there were students and educators from various districts. And that was something that we did many times. Some of the self-support, for example, for what we are calling the school-based mental health providers, folks like school counselors, social workers, and psychologists. We had folks who were from the districts in those jobs working with our staff to make presentations. I also wanted to mention these next 2 slides are about supports for students with special needs. Brian Klimkowitz, our division director for special education, isn't on the call this morning, but we certainly wanted to list the extensive video-based support that we did. It's on this slide and the next, so you can take a look at these. But I also wanted to mention that our supports didn't they weren't restricted to videos and webinars. We've sent out dozens, if not hundreds of pages of paper support, or virtual paper support, I guess, going through the commissioner's office on certainly a weekly, if not a daily basis. So can we go to the next slide? And so these are some of the additional special ed supports, some of the topics that have gone out. All right, and we can go to the next slide, and John's going to take that.
Thanks, Glenn. So I wanted to just provide a brief update on the child nutrition programs in schools. As you're probably aware, the department had to sort of reauthorize our national school lunch programs to switch to what the USDA refers to as a disaster feeding program. So we typically have about 109.
You're cutting out a little, John.
Schools that participate in the program, and we were able to, quite frankly, in a few days and a couple of weekends. Can you hear me now? Okay. And over a couple of weekends, we were able to reauthorize 132 programs, and they began serving programs at. Okay. Well, you can see what's on the slide. So we're serving meals at 400.
So until John comes back in, I think he was just going to point out the data. 132 programs at 460 sites have provided 8 million takeaway school meals in the last, I don't want to get the time, I'm assuming since March 17th.
290.
So the next slide is basically the EBT program, which is supplemental benefits, used to be called SNAP, I believe, but almost 300,000 students received a one-time benefit of $365 to support the student and family during the pandemic.
Glenn, I'd like to jump in for a minute, and I know Ajit is still behind the scenes, but Ajit, I know while John is having some technical difficulties, I wanted folks to understand this pandemic EBT and what it took in a very short time for the state to get approval from the federal government to do this program, and the work that was done with our districts in order to make this happen. So Ajit, could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So I think the magic happened because of collaboration between offices and agencies. It was data folks. It was obviously John and his team working with the DSS partners, as well as our legal office to facilitate any data sharing agreements. And then ultimately what ended up happening is what's on the slide, which is that we are able to provide this supplemental pandemic electronic benefits transfer card, not only to the phase 1 students who are listed as phase 1, those who traditionally receive SNAP benefits, but also to students who receive Medicaid. And the phase 3, which is happening now, is to students who received free or reduced price meals when school was in session, but may not have been part of the SNAP or the Medicaid program. So we were able to collect student addresses for a lot of these students, do a ton of work behind the scenes, and then provide this information to DSS so that they could then issue really approximately $365 per student, totaling to 105 million total for all 3 phases combined. So it was a massive effort, but really succeeded due to collaboration, communication between everybody across the agencies and even within agencies.
Thanks, Ajit. And, not to be lost, supporting our kids and their families, but also putting $105 million in the economy, in the Connecticut economy, which I know folks were really thrilled to be able to do. Thank you for that. John, are you back on?
Yep, if you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Yep, just wanted to thanks for jumping in. And Ajit's downplaying the fact that within a week's time, his team was able to literally collect over about 500,000 addresses from school districts in order to implement phase 2 and phase 3 of this program. So it was a total team effort, both in our agency and with DSS, and it's just a real significant accomplishment. Just one clarification on that program is that it is the students who are eligible to receive that are anyone who's receiving meals under the federal program. So that includes, it does not include any school programs that don't participate in the federal program. We've gotten some questions on that. And it doesn't include preschool students who are part of the child and adult care food program in daycare centers. But that's a significant amount of benefits going out to families. In addition to phase 2 and 3, DSS had to purchase new cards for all of those, approximately 150 or so thousand kids, because they hadn't had the cards prior to that. You may have heard about the Meals to You program, which is a rural food box delivery program in lieu of school meals. It's happening in Winchester and Torrington. Those are the USDA designated areas for rural in Connecticut. And then we all continue to work on the state's FEMA application and extensions to see about other opportunities to feed families in Connecticut through some of that funding. So thank you.
Okay, is that the end, John, of the presentation?
Yes, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all for it. Ajit, before I open up to the committee members, I do have a question. Did we get any feedback from teachers or parents about the Scholastic book packs? Have we gotten any kind of feedback about, were they useful? What were they like?
I think what we have heard is, at least what I'm aware of, is through some of the Twitter posts that we've seen from families in Bridgeport, where they've talked about writing letters to Lego as thank you. I've seen those on our Twitter feeds, but I don't know of a systematic feedback mechanism. I will check in with Chris Soto, who is sort of coordinating this work with Scholastic, and we will get back to the subcommittee.
Okay, thanks. I'm sure it was positive, but it'd be interesting to know, what parents and teachers thought of the packs. I wasn't really sure what was actually each one of them.
Yeah, each pack contains four or five books. It really depends on the grade. The link I have included in here actually spells out what is available, what books are available in each grade. And schools are distributing the packs, but also figuring out how to integrate it within their program, within their instructional program, and also potentially, as now that we're into the summer, as a supplemental summer learning activity. So, and I know we've had some conversations with districts about that, and our academic folks have actually created a little video to spark that thinking as well, in terms of approaches to integrating it.
And Erin, I just want to jump in. I'm sorry, before you turn it over to the members, to say that while you see a list of things, the goal here was not just to show you the long list, but to give you a really sense of the levels of support where staff were almost redeployed in the agency to say, how do we support educators? How do we support districts? How do we support families? How do we support students? And so what you see is kind of the combination of thinking about that level of support. And I think all of our webinars and the things that we've sent out have been well received. And we also share them with other organizations and groups that we're connected with, especially getting things to families so that they're able to get that as well. And we are right now developing a partnership and relationship with CPTV as well. And so that's in the works as well. So I'll stop there.
Well, actually, that was my second question before I turn it over to the committee was, Oh, sorry, go ahead. Is that Jessa?
Yeah, sorry, Ms. Benham. I just wanted to jump in and praise the department for the hard work here and echo Charlene's words, and also note that in my role as technical support for a lot of these documents, we did a lot of 50 state reviews and sort of consideration about what other states were doing. And I can say with confidence that Connecticut is really at the top for the State Department of Education providing resources and really taking the initiative to be really in the front of providing guidance and input. Sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to note that as well.
No problem. And I agree with you 100%. The staff has just been terrific. And I agree, when you look at Connecticut and compare it to other states across the country, it's unbelievable the work that's been done in such a short period of time. Which, Charlene, you mentioned the videos and so forth, and I know they're on the website, and I've watched some of the webinars. I'm wondering how else we can get that out there. I've had some inquiries from educators, some from parent educators of, is there anything out there? And I've told them, go on the website, and it made me think that, maybe we need to try to figure out how we distribute all that good information further. I'm sure districts get it through their superintendents, but, are we sure that it's going all the way through to the classroom teachers, to the parents, maybe local boards of ed, because it's a wealth of information, especially the special ed and the EL information. It's really, really good stuff. And, it's very helpful for them. So I think if they knew it was there, perhaps, we could look into maybe some kind of distributing, beyond our website is what I guess I'm saying. So, but I'm going to open it up to committee members.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
This is Karen. Thank you for this comprehensive presentation. A lot of great information. I'm interested in the food insecurity piece here. And two questions. One, the pandemic EBT, that's CARES Act money, I'm assuming that funded that. So if someone could just clarify that for me. And then my second question around the emergency school meals program, having figured out how to do the pandemic EBT, I was wondering if there's ever been any thought about, rather than the meals that families have to come to a school and pick up, and I know that there are many that are not coming to schools to pick up, whether there was any way of using or seeking approval to use the school meals program funds in a transfer similar to the pandemic EBT, where rather than families getting a prepackaged meal, they got the cash sort of associated with that meal.
Yeah,
sure
thanks.
Require a lot of waivers and approvals, but I'm just wondering, has anybody ever gone down that path?
Yeah, I think first of all, the pandemic EBT funds is a separate program. It's not CARES Act funding. It's a separate application that states have to submit to the USDA. And
Okay.
And the reason that they've created that program is exactly what you're talking about, is that for families who can't get to a school distribution site to get meals, and this is supposed to be the alternative way in which they can receive benefits, because the $365 for that time period equates to the equivalent value of daily breakfast and lunch. So it's essentially $5.70 per day that equals the cost of a breakfast and the cost of lunch. There isn't a requirement that families do either or. If families are able to get to the site to pick up meals, they still can utilize the pandemic EBT benefits.
I understand. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions, Malia?
Thanks. A lot of really great information, and goodness, I wish I could go back and talk about each of them, but I have a sort of a more broad general question that sort of picks up on a bit of what Aaron was mentioning in terms of getting information out there. Also recognizing we're now at the end of school, so to speak, for the majority of our districts, and so I'm sort of coupling a couple questions together, which is I work at a firm that we do the sort of 50 state scans and have done some surveying and research. Folks are familiar with Learning Heroes. We work with them and had done a survey to find out about sort of the uptake from families in particular on all of the sorts of resources that you all have done such a wonderful job at pulling together. So my question is less is not implying any criticism, because I know you all have done great work, but more of just a reflective, if you all have done any sort of analytics on that uptake from families. Are you finding that folks are accessing that? So it gets at, what do we need to do then later on as we try to think about what happens through the summer, but also into the fall, not knowing what that's necessarily going to look like? Have we been reflective about how parents have taken that up? And then is there plans on how we then think about that further distribution and support for families continuing on into the fall?
So that is
Jessa, are you going to speak about, Jessa, in your next reporting? Jessa?
Yeah, Charlene, if you want to jump in, I have a couple thoughts directly related to that. We can, and then we can talk about it a little more later too.
Okay. Perfect. And thank you. That is a great question. We recognize, as hard as we work and as thrilled as we are about the resources we have, getting it to families is really critically important to find out how that is working. The mechanisms that we're using to get feedback, we have the Commissioners Roundtable for Family and Community Engagement in Education, and we try to get information out to them as well. We also have other groups who, I know I personally have listing of what I call really good cultural brokers in communities that we've shared, Malia, information with and trying to get information. We, CERC, within 24 hours, stood up a town hall for us a few weeks ago where we had, I think, close to 200 parents' voices there. And so we now have an infrastructure, to the point that you're making, to really go back and find out what was helpful, what wasn't, and to continue to find out what is still needed. So it's an important piece for us to find out, especially, and we've worked very hard to make sure that we're hearing from voices in communities that are usually traditionally not engaged. And I shouldn't say that we've not actively engaged in the conversation. And so we do have some abilities to go back and to do that and to continue to have that feedback loop. So we know it's not just about what we're doing, but what's the impact around that and what continues to be needed.
Yeah, and I was just going to add to that, just directly in relation to the question, that while I'm not on the side of necessarily receiving the sort of data or feedback, that just to sort of echo Charlene's words, we've acknowledged that one of the things we're talking about is if people have issues with connectivity or devices or those kinds of things, providing internet content is potentially not as effective for certain groups. So I have a bi-weekly call with representatives from the legal aid groups across the state, and we're talking too about how to best potentially repackage, or I'm feeding them the information so that they can try to provide as best they can to community groups and to parents that they work with, but also talking about how to best package this, especially next year, so that it is accessible to all of our students and families.
And if I could just tag on really quickly, the research that we had done, it's almost about, it's not necessarily that the information is bad, or even if it's not being put out there, right? Because indeed, you all, as well as tons of other vendors, are trying to push as much information out there to help people. But it's also a matter of, where's the mental state too of some families, right? We were all going through a crisis and just trying to figure out how to deal with life. that it just wasn't sort of in the stream potentially. But I think, understanding that where families are going into the fall is going to be different from the crisis of where families were, March, this last quarter of the school year. So some of those learnings can be really important, but they need to evolve too, because we'll be at a different part of the crisis, so to speak, right? We'll have been living in it for longer. So thanks.
Malia, it is one of the reasons why I know Glenn, I think, talked about our Talk Tuesdays, and why we're forging a strong relationship with our Department of Children and Families and why the commissioner and deputy commissioner of that agency found it necessary to be on a call with our superintendents and others from districts working with family engagement and well-being. It's for that reason, right, to make sure that families and kids are not falling between the cracks, but we also need to recognize and appreciate the stresses that families are encountering. And we want to make sure that we're cautious that we don't, for families that we're not able to connect with, that we don't automatically, refer them to DCF and now we have a case that's opened for a family. And really that is the hard conversation and the key conversation that we're having across our sister agencies and supporting our districts in terms of what to do during this time. Really recognizing really that tension that we need to be working with.
I wanted to echo what you were saying about like the fact that like when we come in fall, it's definitely going to be like a different part of the crisis. And I think looking at like the presentation, I like this special needs students specifically stood out to me because I think that I've talked to so many of those families and in my district and surrounding districts, and I think they're definitely being hit with it very, very hard. And being able to access the virtual resources for them is definitely a challenge, I think, because they're again like they're in a different part of the crisis, I think, than how other families are. So I think being able to adapt to get resources out to them in a different way, maybe in the fall, is something that we need to look at. But yeah, I think the work that you guys are doing is amazing, and I love the presentation.
Woody, go ahead.
This is Woody. Do we know how many students don't have online access?
Ajit, are you still on?
I think that would be a question for Ajit.
Yeah. There he is.
Yes, we're still finalizing the numbers from our survey that we conducted on participation and connectivity, and hope to have that out very soon. But generally, the estimates are less than 10% of our student population. That's kind of where the numbers are coming in. It might be, because we have estimates, we don't have we didn't do a student level count, but we asked districts to give us aggregate estimates. So it's definitely less than 10%, if not even a lot lower.
This is where it's really important to have aggregated data, though, because I think we need to know that number in our districts of need. Where
that's right. We do have it. We do have it by district. So we are actually looking at where are the pockets of need. And also the governor's office, like I mentioned in the update, the connectivity group that the governor's office has established has the right people who know how to solve these issues at the table and are really looking at the full plethora of options, including wired internet access, as well as cellular internet options. So all hands are on deck to solve this, and it's going to be custom, local, and needing to account for student mobility as well, because students, while we think we might have solved it in one situation, if they move, the connectivity problem might recur.
So, well, what's going to be done for those students that haven't had access and haven't been able to keep up? Is anything going to be done to address them?
Districts are already doing a lot. So when we actually contacted several districts, they have actually done a variety of things, including the most common one is to make hotspots, like little cellular hotspots available to families, and making that, sort of dispersing that. The other strategy that we have heard is what we call wireless extenders, where they might have a bus or some other setup where they basically extend their school network out to a neighborhood or community where there is high need. So it's not perfect, and it's not, I wouldn't say we're definitely not at 100%, obviously, but I think districts are proactively taking some steps, and the department is also trying to work through the governor's office and also reach out to philanthropists to try to sort of fill the hole, so that, to the point about next year, we really need to be near universal if we're going to have any type of hybrid learning be, or blended learning or hybrid learning be part of the mix.
I'm so glad
Let me
that this
jump in
conversation.
too.
Somebody was.
I just want to, we're running into a circumstance that we often do, which is we're getting tight on time. And I just want to, remind everyone that we gave you about 10 minutes in between to kind of sign off here and sign on to the board meeting. But perhaps what we can do is try to continue, try to schedule a time to continue the conversation with a little, more breadth of time. So I'm happy to do that. I think part of the intent of my section, which seems like we probably aren't going to have much time for today, was to get some of your input and thoughts on next steps. The first section was intended to provide you a little bit of information about what we've done, and then the next part was to talk a little bit about next steps. You may have noticed in one of the slides that one of the top priorities for our funding is issues of connectivity and device access. So the state at the state level is also intending to prioritize getting access to that group of kids who may not have access. And we're also talking about the other factors that have to be considered around parent IT sort of abilities. So I think it goes back to your point, Malia and Milan, about addressing this potentially either over the summer or with educating our students and families when they're more receptive, or potentially there can be kind of in-person trainings. So there's conversation about what do we need to do? Maybe it's the first week of school, or maybe it's before school starts, to not just provide the devices and connectivity, but also provide some training and support around how to most effectively access this type of learning. We're hopeful that it can be better planned for because it won't be quite as emergent, just as you pointed out. So I think, again, the next section would be, and I welcome if people want to squeeze in the next 5 minutes, getting a little more feedback on your thoughts about, these priorities and addressing this school level.
Aaron,
I'm
if I
I'm
could,
assuming just that
Aaron, if I
in
could,
the board meeting, just a
Aaron,
second, Don.
if I
I'm assuming go ahead, Don.
okay. I just want to follow up on Karen's concern and the way the issue has been addressed, because putting my other hat on, my CABE hat on, I'm on phone call every week with board chairs throughout the state. So I know that there are numbers of districts whose numbers don't come close to 90%. And I am really concerned, and we're talking about our urban or inner city kids. And in this whole conversation about racism and implicit bias, etc., we cannot just gloss over that, thinking that we are way above 90%. It's not a good figure. So yes, I do want to revisit this soon, and way before we get ready to go back to school.
Yeah, and I believe that I would assume today during the board meeting, we'll be addressing some of the reopening plans, the teams, what they're working on, not what's drafted there, but what we're working on. And perhaps when we see what happens in the board meeting today, we can determine how this committee can meet again. I did want to, just before we close though, just so, because there are so many new members on, just to go over just some of the background of the committee. And I know Laura is not on, but typically for our new members of the committee, one of our charges is legislation proposals, which maybe if we could just to have those provided to the board members that did not see our legislation proposals, even though we didn't really have any legislation that went through, but they are going back in. I would not think that education is going to be one of them that they're going to examine, but it could be. So maybe if the board members could at least see the proposals that we did approve as a board, that would be helpful for the committee members. Obviously the committee, we deal with policy and all the different types of policies that occur. This has been exceptional for us in the last few months. Everything we've had on our agenda, we've pushed off to put in for COVID and to distant learning, which is, reasonable and, expected. And then the third piece is really the review of our bylaws. And that's why I had Justice send them to you. We don't really have time for discussion. And as you note, that those were not renewed last year because we did not have a quorum to renew them. And those are important to look at. That was sort of when our committee ended in between our two commissioners. It was one of the things this committee was looking at. And so I would encourage you to look over those bylaws, and through legal, we'll figure out how. I'm assuming, just, are we waiting until next June to redo them again? I know it's odd years, and we've already gone by that window. So I just wanted the committee to know, and also that, as Jessa had said in her agenda, that next time we will also be, talking about the systemic racism, and Jessa had some very good information, and one of maybe Jessa, another thing that could be sent to the committee, if they weren't on the board, I think it was in February, Charlene, you might know, is the student discipline that we approved. I think it was February that the board approved it. So maybe our new board members, because that is certainly a big part of that talk that we're going to have in discussion. So maybe if they could also have that document, just before we meet the next time, I think would be most helpful for our new board members. Anything else from any board members before we have to log off and hop on to the other meeting?
Just one last thing. I think I sort of want to underscore a bit what Don was saying, but maybe my own little twist though about it, in that whatever the work is going forward, whatever those next steps are, that we are being really clear, concrete, and our attentions are focused on communities that have high populations of color and Black communities, in order to be able to really address the bigger problems that we need to address in education in the state of Connecticut. So to get away from the all things matter all the time, and really focus where we need to in order to get these issues addressed.
Yeah, I agree with you, Malia. As we get ready to write our new comprehensive, 5-year plan, that certainly will be something that has to be a major focus again, and really get into the weeds with it. Ajit?
So just to clarify that, while the statewide might be what I said, locally in particular districts, it is substantially higher. And Mr. Harris and Ms. Walton, I think you're absolutely right that the local needs are very different, and the disproportionalities are evident in the data. And the report that we're developing will highlight those disproportionalities and differences. And it is definitely not a one-size-fits-all. It's a laser-like focus targeted to areas of highest need. And that is actually very clear in what we're seeing.
Yeah, I think it undermines our ability to meet our requirement of free public education, quality education for all children, when we start to require internet access for kids to get that free public education. And so we really need to think about how that gets to families as we're working in this virtual role. It is no longer free public education if I have to have Comcast come into my house for my kid to be able to learn.
Right. And I think I know one of the problems a lot of districts are dealing with is the students who are not engaged in this distant learning, or were not engaged in the distant learning. Was it because of connectivity, or was it because of just simply not engaged? And so that's always a struggle too, to figure that out. But it is something we do have to figure out. With that, we are really pressed here for time, so I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Thank you very much. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Thank you all. I'll reach out to you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.